The Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spagnola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. I'm your host, Carmen Spagnola, joining you from the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, recently known as Victoria, BC, Canada. And welcome to my Witches New Year Retreat, a special podcast miniseries devoted to honoring the season of the witch and the annual Wheel of the Year festival known as Samhain. For the first part of this episode, I'm going to be a bit of a chatty chattertons because there's some language and some history and some context that I think is both fun but also important. So for this episode, if you are new to trance work, or if you struggle to enter a hypnotic state, or even just relax and focus your attention in creative visualization, then I recommend you go back to the last episode if you haven't heard it and listen to the psychoeducation about trance work, what it is, how it works, my training, how I've come to do it in the way that I do. And then if you feel ready, I would like to invite you to listen to the first part of this podcast while making yourself a cup of tea, maybe preparing a hot water bottle to curl up with, or place at your feet, create a nice little nest. Maybe have some candles lit on the altar to draw the ancestors nearer. And maybe you even want to write the names of some deities on slips of paper and place them on the altar, or any other kind of representation of the goddesses or gods you'd like to work with today. What we want to do is dose the field with a lot of safeness and competent protection. Now, before we begin the content, I want to say a word about pronunciations. It's such a contentious thing because, of course, we want to be respectful of the cultures to which we refer. And, of course, we don't want to sound ridiculous when we're trying to pronounce the names of things. But also, to be honest, I spent a lot of years kind of overcompensating to protect myself from feeling stupid and humiliated in public, and especially in educational settings. And there are class underpinnings to that, thinking that something, I don't know, there's something about blending in with the elite that I guess I felt would shield me from the potential of feeling stupid and humiliated and out of place. But of course, that's impossible to really pull off, because if you're not from the upper crust, there are just certain ways of being and ways of thinking that will be your tell. You will never truly be accepted as an equal because your psyche has just been shaped so differently. And at some point, if you can just say fuck elitism in any context, not just academia, then I think you will enjoy life more. I think you will enjoy learning a lot more. I personally enjoy having knowledge and sharing knowledge a lot more now that I just name elitism for what it is. So I say, just give pronunciation your best shot. That's what I'm going to do. And if people correct you, you can just say thank you. And if they don't understand you, they can let you know. And it's not a big deal. If you've offended someone with mispronunciation, or if people treat you differently because of mispronunciation, that's an opportunity to bring your critical analysis to bear and your class analysis to bear. If you're treated differently based on the pronunciation of words rather than the meaning of your words, then people can just fuck off. We're not here for the class's gatekeeping. So the point of communication is understanding. So if you understand what I'm saying, that's usually going to be good enough for our purposes. So I pronounce the goddess's name, Hecate, as Hecate. I pronounce it that way because, I'm pronouncing it like similarly spelled names that are commonly pronounced in English in that way, like Persephone, Calliope, Hermione, Daphne, Phoebe. So if you want to pronounce it differently, like Hecate, that's just fine. Lots of people do. And so you might enjoy the very satisfying emphasis in the pronunciation of Demeter. And you might find that my choice of Demeter is like a little wanting. It's like a little soft, a little milquetoast for such a powerful deity. I welcome you to just edit my pronunciation in your own mind, okay? Now, my understanding is that in North American English, we would pronounce the sacred city I'm talking about today as Eleusis, whereas in Greece, they pronounce it Eleusis. So like, take your pick, have a go at something else entirely if you want. We'll see if like somewhere we're all going to get to where we want to go. Like, it's pretty low risk. So just roll the dice, we're just going to try to say some words. Now, sometimes you will see Persephone referred to as Kore, how I would say it, Kore, Kore. Now, I've heard noted American scholars, including Jean Shinoda Bolin, just like I saw her, I went to one of her 2-day workshops. She lectured for like 16 hours. We sat in church pews the whole time. I had no problem with it. It was so amazing. She spent the whole time pronouncing it as core, as like an American would likely do, right? So whether you want to pronounce it Kore or core or even Kore is probably just fine, so long as we're all kind of riding this train of thought to the same destination, So apologies in advance to anyone who's annoyed at my pronunciation today, and also maybe my inconsistencies. Try to think of it as like we're all just kind of sidling up to a buffet of podcast delights, and you might love some of my offerings and find others really distasteful. You are in charge of what you consume. You don't even have to take anything at all. Personally, I will say on this topic, I've kind of enjoyed my conversations, and some of them have been recorded on this podcast, with my mentor, Dr. Cindy Brennan, who's one of the world's foremost authorities on Hecate. And we're talking about Hecate, and she is steadfastly adhering to her preferred pronunciation of Hecate, because she's one of the world's foremost experts. And I'm sticking to mine, Hecate, because I like the way it sort of matches with Persephone. And like sometimes each of us at different points in the conversation will kind of slightly adapt to the other one's way, even just like once or twice, almost as if to affirm like, yes, I honor your way. We're talking about the same thing. But then, we slide into what's comfortable for us. I say, do what's comfortable for you. And as long as we have shared understanding, that's the most important thing. Okay, so let's turn our attention to today's subject matter, the great Mother Demeter and her daughter Persephone, and to a lesser extent in this story, she's a lesser character, but their guardian and ally Hecate. So it may interest you to know that I consider this episode an offering to Demeter. So right now I have wheat berries and barley on my desk. I have a yellow thread around my wrist. I used an image of a terracotta figure of Demeter that was found at an archaeological dig at Eleusis, would have been used as an offering in the ancient world, this figurine. I used that as the episode thumbnail image. So I just want to name that and make that explicit, that this is one of the ways you can do your devotional practice. It's just weaving it in to your day, into your work even. I personally feel called to honor Demeter in a bigger way lately as I transition from city life to farm life. And the hope is that we will regenerate the land there and grow most of our own grains for ourselves and for our animals. So I definitely want to level up my devotional offerings, certainly throughout this first winter that we spend there. And I want to be in her good graces, and I want our family to be favored come the next planting season. And I also just feel a deep personal connection to Persephone and Demeter and Hecate. Just for so long, I've been fascinated with their connection to the Eleusinian Mysteries. And for folks who aren't familiar with the myth of Demeter and Persephone, very briefly here, Persephone is the goddess who descended to the underworld, and the more recent telling of the myth is that it was an unwilling descent where she was kidnapped and raped by her uncle. However, The pre-patriarchal versions of the myth don't frame her descent so much as punishment, but rather as like a dutiful and willing spiritual initiation. Anyway, so the Eleusinian Mysteries were a collective ritual performed during the later times, during the more kind of like, well, the more recent, the more popular patriarchal version of her story is where the mysteries start to come in. And so during this time, Demeter, who is the goddess of all plant life, either is like searching for or keeping vigil for her daughter and ignores the earth and its flourishing. So during the 3 months of Persephone's time in the underworld, the earth goes dormant in wait. I'm going to restate this and like kind of bring this back in a little later, because I think it's worth getting that straight in our minds, that there are eras of history where the myths are represented differently. And it's important to kind of locate the Eleusinian Mysteries in the patriarchal era. Anyway, but for now, just moving on, I also want to acknowledge in this lineage, and part of like citation justice and also celebration, is that there are some really wonderful feminist theologians, scholars, researchers, archaeologists who've studied goddess worship. And in the past on this show, we've highlighted the works of like Maria Gimbutas and Charlene Spretnak and other favorites who are lifting up these strong feminist voices in those fields. Today, I want to acknowledge and thank a researcher and teacher who's no longer alive, but through her writings and the influence she's had on many prominent figures and teachers within women's spirituality and feminist anthropology, her influence is still being felt, and that's Dr. Mara Lynn Keller. So Dr. Keller's teaching and mentorship spanned like 50 years, and she was a co-founder of the Women's Spirituality Program at the California Institute of Integral Studies back in the early 90s. She served as the director of the Women's Spirituality Master of Arts and PhD programs there for many years, and she said she wanted to promote dialogue between goddess people and God people. And even though she died in 2023, her work continues to shape and guide and inspire that dialogue between God people and goddess people. And I would say like animist people and goddess people and agnostic people and goddess people, and probably many other side conversations, because her writing was quite prolific. She's had the numerous papers, and academic journals have published articles about goddesses of Crete and Greece that she's written. There's a very well-known paper called Sacred Arts and Ritual in Crete of the Mother Goddess. And then one of my favorites, which is the one I'm drawing a good portion of today's lecture and the journey work, and it's called the Eleusinian Mysteries, Ritual Path of Initiation. So thank you to Dr. Keller for blessing our lives with her work and her influence. So let's turn attention to the Eleusinian Mysteries. So for a period of 2,000 years, roughly like 1450 BCE to 400 CE, the autumnal equinox heralded the annual performance of the greater mysteries at Eleusis, which celebrated the story of Demeter's pause and Persephone's underworld journey through winter. Then the lesser mysteries at Eleusis were performed in the spring around the equinox. So both equinoxes kind of bookended the mysteries. So why was Eleusis the site of something so special in the ancient world? Well, again, if you've listened to it's probably my most popular episode. I can't remember what number it is. It's in the 60s, 63, 64, something like that. It's called Learning to See in the Dark, episode of the Numinous podcast. Then you already know the story of Demeter and Persephone very well, but the more feminist version. So we're kind of going back to that patriarchal version. In this period that we're talking about, the sky gods are well established. So Persephone is in the underworld. Demeter is bereft without her earth side. Persephone has been abducted, but at this point, Demeter doesn't realize it yet. And so in her anguish, she's wandering the earth searching for her lost daughter. And on her search, Demeter came to Eleusis, which is just outside Athens. Right now, today, presently, it's actually been incorporated into it as just a municipality. But back then, it was, 13 miles away. So Demeter is wandering, and she comes to Eleusis disguised as an old woman, and she's befriended by the royal family there. She's hired as a nursemaid for their infant prince, and secretly at night she starts to turn him immortal by feeding him ambrosia, the food of the gods. And then after she feeds him the food of the gods, she places him in a fire to burn away his mortality. And so she's doing this every night. Then the queen walks in on her, and she's unaware of the nurse's true identity. And she thinks that the nurse, Demeter, is trying to kill the child. And so she, screams, and it's like a big uproar in the house, and Demeter reveals her true identity, but the goddess is very upset at being sort of accused by a mortal of doing something terrible, but also she's still very upset about missing her own daughter. So she spitefully, angrily spreads famine across Greece, and she demands that a temple be built in her honor in Eleusis. So then once that happens and she is appeased, then Demeter teaches the city's inhabitants her sacred rituals. And that's how the Eleusinian Mysteries cult is created. And after that, Demeter carries on to continue her search for Persephone. So as I said, today, Eleusis is a suburban municipality of Athens. It's commonly called Eleusina. But back in the ancient world, like 1,500 years before the birth of Jesus, Eleusis was its own military stronghold, as I said, like 13 miles away from Athens. Athens and Eleusis were at war for a time, and the divisions were both military and theological. So Athens was the seat of power for Athena, but Eleusis belonged to Poseidon. And ultimately, so they were at war, waging war, but ultimately the Eleusinians lose, and they concede that Athens was mightier in every way, except in the observation and the celebration of the mysteries. And this is because the mysteries at that time, Eleusis had their own sacred mysteries devoted to Demeter, but other places around the world also had mysteries. I'll talk about that in a moment. Anyway, since Eleusis was supreme at just like how they rolled out the mysteries and so elaborately, it was decided that these two cities would be friendly once again, but Eleusis would maintain the management of these annual activities. And so the character of the city, so important was its sacred character, that Eleusis was the only other region under Athenian rule that was allowed to like mint its own coin and call itself a true city. And the road between Athens and Eleusis, where the initiates would walk this annual pilgrimage, was thereafter known as the Sacred Way. And the Sacred Way led from the heart of Athens all the way directly to the very large, like theater-sized temple of Demeter in Eleusis. And it was like on a bit of a hill in Eleusis, and like about 1 kilometer away from the temple of Demeter was this river, Cephissus, and it had a bridge over it. So it just kind of had a lot of specialness and sacredness to that site, and also to the rituals they'd been doing. So it elevated Eleusis to ally and sort of like holder of the spiritual sacred knowledge in partnership with Athens. So Eleusis, even though the city was ruled over by Poseidon, or was like under the domain of Poseidon, Eleusis was also the seat of worship for Demeter and Persephone, for miles and miles around. As I said, it kind of stood on a small hill. It's not far from the sea. It was even believed that one of the caves along the coast of Eleusis was the very one that Hades entered when he took Persephone to the underworld. And the Greeks believed that these sacred initiation rites enshrined the natural order of the cosmos and held society together. The rituals involved the reenactment of the death and the rebirth of the crops, which they saw as equivalent to the perpetuation of the human race. And they thought that life without these rituals would just be unlivable, that everything would descend into disorder and that people would have no purpose. Cicero wrote that the Eleusinian Mysteries gave a reason to not only live in joy, but also to die with better hope. The rituals centered around themes of reward in the afterlife, and not just death, but rebirth, the cycle of life, and how people would come back just like the crops would come back. And these mysteries, these rituals were like an opportunity to experience direct knowing of that miraculous transmutation. One might even say it was an opportunity for direct connection with the goddesses, their secrets, their consciousness, and even their powers. Now, although the Eleusinian Mysteries are by far the most famous of these types of seasonal rites of passage that, most people like us, you, me, listening to this, that are kind of interested in rites of passage or interested in mythology in the ancient world, most of us would have heard then of the Eleusinian Mysteries. But they were not actually unique to Eleusis or even to Athens or even to Greece. Archaeological records tell us that many places shared similar beliefs and rituals that would be enacted to honor the goddess of grain or agriculture. There were similar mysteries enacted in Egypt, in Anatolia, which is like modern-day Turkey, and parts of what we now know of as Bulgaria, which went by the ancient name Thrace. That's how they pronounce it in modern Greece. Anyway, Thrace. I totally went down like a rabbit hole trying to be like, why, who says it Thrace and who says it Thrace? Anyway, I'm going to say Thrace. Anyway, in Athens, the penalty for revealing what happened at the mysteries, like people who were initiates, if they revealed the mysteries to non-initiates, the penalty was death. It was the only place, though, where the penalty was death, but it was highly, highly forbidden to speak open about them in Athens or Eleusis or anywhere around there. But we have a pretty good idea of what happened because in the 5th century BCE, Diodorus wrote that not too far away at the palace of Knossos on Crete, Demeter's mysteries were performed there kind of just like as an open secret. It was an open secret what was happening there. It wasn't that mysterious. Now, Knossos, of course, is even more ancient than Athens. Knossos was such an ancient society that the ancient Greeks would refer to it as ancient Greece. And they were, well known for having a cult to a goddess whose name we don't know, but also they have, and I don't know if anybody's been there, but if you've been there, you've seen, they have these incredible rooms with bulls everywhere. So anytime you see a bull in any of the old European, when we say old, we mean far, 5,000, 6,000 years ago, we know that we're dealing with goddess worship. Anyway, people knew about what happened at Knossos, for a long time, but then it's actually written about in the 5th century. So it wasn't that mysterious. People heard about what happened, and hints about what happened were recorded in marble relief and frescoes and painted ceramics. So the main period of worship we're talking about here stretches back from today, 3,400 years for sure. But some scholars actually think the roots of Demeter's mysteries go back to the Neolithic age and the agrarian revolution. So that's more 12,000 years ago. But the mysteries got really popular among the ancient Greek elite around 600 BCE. And there was a flourishing of artistic references to them. And so that's, then we start to see these written records. But all of that comes to a halt in 392 BCE when the Christian emperor Theodosius puts an end to them. Like, what a legacy. Hey, can you imagine saying like, yeah, I'm going to put a stop to this annual observance that's been happening for like over 1,000 years, like 1,050 years. Like, what a disappointment Theodosius was. Like, and also just like the gall, the audacity. Anyway, so yeah, one guy ends this continuously running pilgrimage that was a millennium old. Anyway, so back in the day, the mysteries took place in autumn. Everyone would convene in Athens, and then gradually over a period of days, they'd walk west on this 20-kilometer pilgrimage towards Eleusis. And like any spiritual quest, they're seeking a vision of the afterlife so beautiful and so powerful that they would no longer fear death, but they would also see their lives and see themselves differently. They would recognize their place in the world and their role in this lifetime. And then hopefully they choose to live differently, like to live out the best vision of themselves and have faith in the immortality of their soul. So over the course of the 9 days, initiates reenacted the myth of Demeter and Persephone, like hence the wandering, hence the pilgrimage, right? Their painful separation, and then their joyful reunion. The mysteries were actually quite an unusual moment in the annual life of civic society because they were open to everyone. So young and old, men and women, free people, and enslaved. So you had quite a motley crew kind of gathered, and then even that would swell and become so much bigger, and that because they had their friends and family with them. But even just that intermingling of different social strata would have been part of the bigger revelation, right? Coming into closer and more spiritually intimate contact with people from many different parts of society. So in the first few days, initiates would be escorted by their people, their beloved community, their witnesses. And that meant that Athens on day one would have like a very large crowd gathered. And so on that first day, the initiates and their people entered a period of silence and purification to prepare for this procession through the agora. So when you think of Athens, like today, immediately the image that comes to mind is the Acropolis, right? So the agora was just downhill from it. And it was like a 30-acre hub of culture and city life with markets and theaters, teaching porches, temples, a courthouse, a prison. Basically, it was like downtown. And I put links. I don't know if you do this, but whenever I'm like reading about the ancient world, I will go on Google Earth and see what it looks like today. And I always find it so hilarious when I was looking up the river Cephisus. Basically, like what's there now is like a huge autostrada, like a huge highway, and Google Earth like plopped me down at a Ford dealership in the middle of Athens, basically. But I've put links in the show notes so you can see what the ruins at Eleusis look like today. And it's like a drone shot. So you can like look up and you can see like, oh, across all of these homes and car dealerships and like this industrial zone is the ocean right there. And same thing with the agora. You can go and look and kind of orient yourself. And I think those things will be probably nice and helpful when we get to the trance work. Anyway, as the procession made its way through the agora, people paid respects along the way at shrines to the smaller shrines to Demeter and Persephone, Athena, Zeus, many other gods. And this was all done in silence because people were fasting both from speaking and from food, from sunrise to sunset. Now, I say that it's silent. I think it must have been impossible to keep 30 acres of people or like thousands of people, which is what they believe. It is written, thousands of people would have made this procession. So it kind of makes me wonder if it's only the initiates who are fasting from speaking and food. Anyway, we don't know. Imagine that as you will. So to close out the rituals of day one, what would happen is priestesses from Eleusis would present a basket containing Demeter's sacred objects to the priestesses of Athena in Athena's temple as a symbol of accord and mutual respect between the goddesses, Demeter and Athena, and presumably a symbol of peace between the cities, because it's kind of like, okay, Eleusis is kind of like, okay, we're going to take your people into our city walls, but we promise not to hurt them. And you can hold our sacred objects basically at ransom just in case, So now we don't know exactly what the sacred objects in the basket were, but we can probably assume they weren't just like representations of things sacred to Demeter, like a bit of wheat or a beautiful torch. They weren't just symbolic, right? Much like any reliquary, they were probably objects that were believed to have been actually touched or transformed by or blessed by Demeter in some way. Like, just for example, I'm totally making this up, but maybe it's like, oh, this is a piece of cloth from the disguise she wore as nursemaid to Metanira, queen of Eleusis, who was also happened to be daughter of the king of Athens. So, we have a little bit of the cloak she wore as her disguise, So the priestesses presented to the priestesses of Athena, here's a basket full of sacred objects. And then that kind of symbolized like, okay, we're dropping into sacred space now. And then after dark, then the feasting began. On the second day, there was a procession to the sea, and everyone would go for cleansing. So this is like a pretty classic purification process, right, that happens in most rites of passage. But you have to imagine the scene. It must have been spectacular, like thousands of people, hundreds of initiates with all their friends and families walking into the sea where they would cleanse themselves and be purified by Poseidon's blessing. And then the third day was the presentation of the sacred offerings from the initiates to the emperor and to the goddesses. So there would be sacred offerings, cornucopias of fruits, baskets of grain, sacrificial pigs. People would pay the tithes of the grain harvest. Those would be brought to the emperor. So this feast of first fruits would be happening. And there was singing and dancing and performances dedicated to the two goddesses, Demeter and Persephone, and feasting all night long. Then the fourth day was devoted to propitiating the gods and goddesses of healing. So on that day, initiates would visit the Asclepion along the way, the dream temple, to participate in a night vigil. So the Asclepion was run by priestesses and priests, named after Asclepius, the great doctor. And it was surrounded by gardens filled with medicinal plants and sacred snakes. And I'm not sure whether dogs are associated with the Asclepion. Like, we know there were lots of dogs there, and I'm not sure if it's like dogs were already associated with medicine, and so that's why the dream temples were known to have lots of them, or whether like stray dogs would just always hang around and get fed by the attendants, so thereafter they became associated with medicine. But either way, the temples were known for having the goodest dogs. They were that's maybe my little twist, emphasis mine. So snakes, dogs, plants, beautiful gardens, and the initiates would go and they would have a pharmakia consultation with the doctor/magician. So essentially, they would be seeing their naturopath. They would get some proper tinctures and remedies for whatever was their current troubling situation. They'd consume those, and then they would get ritually purified by cleansing waters and fumigation, cleansing smoke. And then in the evening, they would be taken to lie down in the dream temple. And before they went to sleep, they would invite a deity to deliver their life instructions and a sense of their divine purpose. The dream temple had lots of attendants, these priests and priestesses, who would keep watch over the initiates all night and help the initiates interpret their dreams when they woke up. And these attendants were called therapeutes, which is the source of our modern word therapist. So very interesting that the attendants, there were like kind of different echelons, the high priests and priestesses, and then like the kind of other spiritual attendants, the therapeutes, who did the dream interpretation. Then on the fifth day, the grand procession begins, and thousands of people are now, at this point, they would be at the edge of the city, and they would be making their pilgrimage along the sacred way through this very beautiful fertile plain from Athens to the fields of Eleusis, which were like still, 7 or 10 miles out of the city, still a long way to go. And along the way, smaller rituals would be performed. So youth would offer locks of their hair at the temple of Artemis or to the Morai, the Fates. And at the boundary between Athens and Eleusis, adults would tie saffron-dyed ribbons around their right wrist and their left ankle, which would symbolize that they had bound themselves to the mother goddess Demeter. And in order to cross this boundary, you had to cross the bridge over the river Cephissus, leaving your friends and family behind. And on the bridge, you would pass this rowdy, raucous goddess named Baubo, or someone representing Baubo, who would tell you jokes and roast you. And she was known for lifting her skirts and flashing you. And she was the sacred fool of Demeter. She was the one who makes sure you laugh and tells you, take the rituals seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. Finally, that night, the procession would arrive at Demeter's sanctuary, that very large temple, big theater-sized temple. It would be lit by torches, was beautifully adorned and fragrant, and the initiates would be greeted by priestesses. And then during that period of time that they're all at Demeter's sanctuary, it's like another kind of 3-4 days, at the heart of the Eleusinian Mysteries, they experience logomena, dromena, and diknaimena. Logomena, dromena, diknaimena, which translates to things said, things done, and things seen. So we don't know precisely what the things said, things done, and things seen were, but archaeological evidence supports this theory that the rituals were really kicked off now when everyone drank this honey-sweetened, minted barley water. So all the initiates were served this barley water, and then this all-night revelry and dancing and music began. Now, the thing we know about this special barley in the beverage was that it was infected with ergot. Well, I say we know this. There's a lot of evidence for it. I don't know if archaeologists ever really say they know stuff, but the evidence is that the beverage was infected with ergot, and ergot is a psychoactive fungus that has LSD in it. So there'd be these like 3 hazy days where offerings were made at shrines to Hecate of the Crossroads, Poseidon, Lord of the Sea, and Artemis of the Portals, and people were engaged in their sacred plant medicine journey. Then on the final evening in the temple, more sweet minted barley water was drunk, and the initiates would take in a performance that reenacted the reunion of the mother Demeter and the child Persephone, and then they would be joined by the loving and devoted crone aspect of Hecate. And in the hymn to Demeter, the Homeric poet writes, "Happy at long last together, held close in each other's arms, each receives joy from the other, each gives joy in return. Hecate comes near to embrace and welcome back with great love, holy Demeter's daughter. Now to Persephone, this elder queen Hecate, will become priestess and devoted companion." And then the next morning at sunrise of the 9th day, having been adopted by Demeter and brought under her care, all the initiates would enact the pourings of plenty, so offering libations to the ancestors and the beloved dead who were called the Demetrioi. And then they would begin the long walk back to Athens, back to their family and work, but now with a new way of seeing and being in the world and a new sense of purpose and faith. As I said, I dropped links in the show notes to Google Earth so you can see what Eleusis and the Agora look like today. I've also linked to Dr. Mara Keller's papers. And before we settle in for the trance journey to Eleusis, I just want to thank everyone who has left me reviews in Apple Podcasts or in your podcast player. I've been podcasting a long time, and it's like easy to allow the reviews to get a little dusty. And it's easy to kind of think like, it's just me talking to myself. And, I don't know who the thousands of people are that are downloading. I guess they don't really care. I don't really hear from them. Not to like guilt trip you, but I just mean like it's very easy to feel totally isolated doing this. But then I see like a few words from people and I'm like, wow, there's like a person out there that I was spending time with without realizing it. It's just nice to feel connected in that way. And of course, I would love to keep the Numinous podcast relevant to the algorithm and like easy to find. So thank you to everybody who has put in a review. And also, if you're listening on your phone, I would super appreciate like a few kind words to know you're out there, and also keep finding people like us, just people like us who are kind of into this stuff. If this is your jam, I want to know. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now we're going to shift into trance work. So I just want to offer the disclaimer. Do not listen to this trance track while you're driving a car, riding a bike, operating heavy machinery, that kind of thing. You want to be able to be in a very safe and comfortable environment with as few distractions as possible. I invite you to get cozy. You can do this sitting or lying down. And take a nice deep breath that lifts your chest and send it all the way down into your deepness, connecting with the place that feels like your center today. Let your body become soft. Feel your muscles begin to release and let go. Your eyebrows drifting apart, your jaw relaxing, sinking down deeper into a more comfortable and relaxed state of being. Feel your seat and your feet as you sink down, feeling fully supported, even perhaps feeling as though the earth is rising to hold you, taking the weight. Continue to relax your muscles and release your mind as you imagine or pretend or just think about going to a place in nature where you feel at home, well received, and completely safe. You might notice the plants and the animals that are there, the quality of light, the temperature on your skin, the contact with the earth that nurtures you, perhaps you'll find it's easier and easier to relax even more deeply if you lie down on the earth, the warm, soft, supportive earth. And while you lie there with your eyes closed, allow your imagination to wander, traveling through time and space, through any dimension necessary, to the ancient Athenian agora. Find yourself transported, and as the sights and sounds and smells and feeling of that time and place draw nearer, you find it easier and easier to just drop into the scene. 3, 2, 1, and you are there now in ancient Athens, in the outdoor market, and bring your awareness to your feet. Notice if you're wearing anything on your feet, and become aware of any garments you're wearing. Perhaps you can sense your age, your gender expression, your social status, or any other detail that feels relevant and significant for you to remember now. It is day 1 of the greater mysteries, and you notice excitement in the crowd. And you are excited as an initiate, and you make your way to the temple of Athena. And as the people crowd, there falls a hush as the priestesses from Eleusis enter the temple carrying the baskets of sacred objects. You may see the objects or simply sense them. You may have an inner knowing or intuition about them. Notice the sacred moment when the priestesses to Athena receive the sacred objects of Demeter. And for the rest of the day and the evening, there is feasting. There might be dancing or performances. And as you move through the night, carrying your excitement and perhaps a little bit of apprehension, you find that you have slept and wake to a beautiful sunrise on the second day. And on this second day, thousands of you are walking the roads, arriving at the beach. Perhaps you have friends, family members, teachers. Others are there with you. And as you enter the water, you are cleansed in the womb waters of Mother Earth, and you are blessed by Poseidon. Feel yourself be purified. Release and let go, and allow yourself to be cleansed by these healing, salty sea waters now. And after a long day of pilgrimage and a night of deep sleep, on the third day you arise, and it is the time to deliver your tithe of grain and your offerings of fruit to the emperor in honor of the two goddesses Demeter and Persephone. At this feast of first fruits, there is music and dancing. You might allow your own body to move and rock and sway, dancing as an offering to Demeter and Persephone. And after the feast and a deep sleep, you awake on the fourth day, the day when you will propitiate the gods and goddesses of healing. As you walk, you make your way to the dream temple of Asclepius. You behold the beautiful and medicinal gardens. You might notice the healing allies in animal form, the snakes, the dogs. Perhaps you even receive a visitation from some other animal who gives you strength and blessing now. Take a few more deep breaths in to take in the blessings and medicine of your animal helper now. With the inhale, allow their medicine to go down deeply in your body, and with the exhale, distribute that medicine to every single cell. You are taken to a healing hut, and inside there is a healer who is talented with pharmakeia, working with medicinal and magical herbs. You are cleansed. There is sacred smoke fumigation. You receive your tinctures. You take a special tea of mugwort and then are taken to the dream temple. attendant approaches, who assures you that they will keep watch over you through the night, supporting you, helping you interpret any dreams you may have. And together in prayer, the two of you invoke the deity who will be of highest and greatest service to you. A deity who has a message for you about your purpose and some encouragement for you. And after a beautiful healing sleep of good dreams, you wake up on the 5th day, and the grand procession begins. Along the way to Eleusis, you stop at several temples. You make offerings to Artemis. You make offerings to Aphrodite. You make offerings to Hecate. And soon you arrive at the threshold, the boundary between Athens and Eleusis. But before you step onto the bridge, an attendant comes and ties a saffron yellow string to your right wrist and your left ankle, signaling your devotion to the great mother goddess Demeter. As you cross over the river, on the bridge, you see Baobo, and she flashes herself at you and makes you laugh and lightens the mood and helps you dispel any nervousness, any apprehension, and any fear. A while later, as the sun is dipping down below the horizon, the procession finally arrives at Demeter's sanctuary, a large theater that is lit by torches, adorned with flowers. The aromas of flowers and incense are intoxicating. The drumming thrums in your heart, and the priestesses open their arms in welcome. Rejoicing at your arrival, you are guided by attendants who take you to the feast table, and all night long you enjoy the revelry, the beautiful dances and performances, the laughter, the connection. Over the coming few days, you sleep deeply with rich and vivid dreams. And during the days, you go to the sea with offerings to Lord Poseidon. You go to the sacred grove of trees with offerings to Artemis of the portals. You go to the three-way crossroads with offerings to Hecate. And each night, as you take your drink of the sweet, minted barley water, you receive more and more visions of your unique contribution, your role and your place among your people in this lifetime. Each night, in the fragrant and beautiful temple of Demeter, things are said, things are done, and things are seen. The communion drink of sweet barley water is delicious and good, and gives you good thoughts and warm feelings and beautiful visions for your life. And on the final night, each initiate, including yourself, is crowned with flowers and ribbons of yellow to confirm your adoption by Demeter as her hearth child. And you sense the great goddess kissing you on the forehead, receiving you into her care. And now Hecate embraces her grandchild Persephone, and they turn to you with open arms. In their embrace, now you will rest. Rising of the sun, the flowering of the orchards and the flowers and the wheat fields and the flourishing of the earth in one last breath of life before the dark time of the year. The morning more beautiful than you've ever experienced it. The sense of the earth and your right place upon it restored. Now on the 9th day, the pourings of plenty and the return are ahead of you. And so as you return home, you pour out all that's left of your sweet minted barley water, pouring it out onto the earth as an offering for your ancestors, the Demetrioi, all the other initiates who've come before you in your lineage. And you walk home to your family and friends and work, but now with a new vision for your life. As you cross back over the bridge, you find yourself leaving the non-ordinary world. Your feet falling heavy on the earth, pondering what your vision means. Finding yourself easily and effortlessly return to your home. All parts of you present. All parts of your soul called back, your energy contained in your body, your awareness aligned with your heart. And find yourself moving back through time and space, returning to the present day. locate yourself here, now, in the present day, in your room. Gradually coming back. You might start wiggling your fingers and toes, knowing that number one, everything you've experienced has gone into your conscious and your subconscious mind, and your mind is going to work to integrate this information, making it easier and easier to follow. And over the next hours, days, and weeks, you'll find an interesting thing happens without even needing to think about your vision. With ease and grace, it all starts to fall into place. And number two, when you sleep tonight, you're going to sleep a nice, deep, relaxing, and restorative sleep. And when you wake up in the morning, no matter how much time has passed, it'll feel like the perfect amount of rest. You'll wake up in the morning feeling refreshed, restored, revitalized, rejuvenated, and ready to face the day. And number three, anything you need to do after this, whether you need to drive or take a call or have an important conversation, you're going to be able to do so safely, feeling grounded, solid, and stable in your body and clear in your mind. Number four, as you're coming all the way back to normal, everyday waking consciousness, have a nice stretch. And when you're ready, number five, open your eyes, wide awake and alert, and feeling better than before. Nice work. I would like to encourage you to journal now, write down any impressions that you received. If you just fell asleep for most of it, that's totally fine too. You probably needed that. You can always come back and listen at a later time. Till next time, take care.